So there definitely needs to be consequences for people who maliciously lie about others with the intent to harm them. For example, the defamation lawsuit against Alex Jones brought by the parents of Sandy Hook victims was more than justified, and I'm glad that they won. With that being said, elites who haven't actually been defamed shouldn't be able to exploit our legal system in order to wage lawfare against regular people who don't have the money and power that they have. We've seen this with Donald Trump. He's launched multiple frivolous lawsuits against media companies, accusing them of defamation. Elon Musk has been incredibly litigious towards journalists and media outlets as well. But I mean, those are just a few high-profile examples. That's just the tip of the iceberg. It happened to me as well. A couple of years ago, Kim Iverson threatened to sue me because I criticized her commentary on The Hill about Elliot Page, a trans man. Now, Kim Iverson never followed through on that threat, but oftentimes the mere threat of a lawsuit alone is enough to shut down criticism. It's effective, hence why it's become so common in this country. Even if a rich person knows that they can't win a defamation lawsuit, since that's a fairly high bar to clear in the United States, simply forcing somebody to defend themselves in court against a bogus defamation suit can literally bankrupt them. I mean, if they have money and you don't, they could easily force you to capitulate even if they're in the wrong, because that's how power works. This is called a strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's a frivolous lawsuit intended to stifle criticism, especially of public figures, although the rise of slap suits has coincided with the rise in anti-slap laws, which protect citizens from these kinds of lawsuits and in some instances even punish the perpetrators of slap suits. And according to the Public Participation Project, about 18 states have received either an A or B grade for their protections against slap suits, and I am very fortunate to live in a state with some of the strongest anti-slap laws in the country, Oregon. But it's unfortunate that these laws are needed in the first place. But I mean, if there's a way for rich and powerful people to exploit and abuse our legal system for their personal benefit, of course, that's what they're going to do. But it's not just a right-wing thing. I gave you examples of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. But prominent liberals, as of late especially, have resorted to defamation threats and lawsuits to shut down free speech as well. And I want to talk about that in today's video. For example, there is Sheila Sherfilus-McCormick. This is a Florida corporate Democrat who filed a defamation lawsuit against her 26-year-old progressive primary opponent, Elijah Manley, because of what she called a pattern of false statements accusing her of corruption, ethical violations, and a misuse of campaign funds. And they cite this specific claim that Elijah Manley made in an ad.
Sheila Sherfilus-McCormick's company was supposed to get $57,000 in COVID relief funds, but due to a government error, it received $5.7 million. Instead of returning the money, the company kept it. Not long after, Sherfilus-McCormick poured over $6 million into her own congressional campaign.
Our current congressperson, Sheila Sherfilus-McCormick, took $5.7 million from the taxpayers, and that really shows bad judgment on her part. They accidentally overpaid her. She took all of the money. That's not something anyone in District 20 can do and get away with. Regular people don't get away with these types of crimes.
Now, that was posted to his campaign's Instagram on June 5th, and the story that he's talking about has been reported on by local media in Florida. In fact, WPTV just reported in July that her former company settled a lawsuit with Florida's Department of Energy Management and agreed to pay back the money over the next 19 years. So I don't really know if her claim is that he defamed her because he misrepresented the details of that story, or if she takes issue with his insinuation that it reflects poorly on her as a leader, when perhaps her contention is that it was a mistake and not deliberate. I don't know. But the other example that they give, which they claim points to a pattern of false statements from Manley, is, quote, a letter from Manley that the South Florida Sun-Sentinel published on July 4th. In it, Manley said that while he once rooted for the congresswoman, he no longer does because the Democrats' collapse in our state has coincided with her election and the many ethical and legal scandals she brought to Congress. Now, he cited an ongoing House Ethics Committee probe into whether Sherfilus-McCormick broke campaign finance laws in 2016. 2022, including accepting contributions and in-kind aid that may have exceeded legal limits, illegally accepting campaign contributions linked to official actions, and unlawfully directed taxpayer funds meant for community projects to a for-profit company. The panel's investigative arm reported in May that there was, quote, probable or substantial reason to believe those allegations were valid. Now, it's important to note that the House Ethics Committee or any other legal entity has not formally claimed that she broke any laws, and she unequivocally claims that she's innocent. But given the conclusion of the investigation, it's not surprising to see her Democratic primary opponent publicize that information. This is an election, and he's trying to prove that he's the better candidate and that she is the weaker candidate. Yet she is suing him for defamation because he criticized her by citing local news articles about her. Now, listen, maybe she genuinely believes that she has a case. That's possible. But one thing that's certain is that Elijah Manley, her opponent, is going to have to spend money and time that he probably doesn't have defending himself in court from this lawsuit. And even if he ends up winning in the end, it's going to cripple his campaign because he's going to have to go up against this powerful member of Congress who's very wealthy, and chances are he's going to run out of legal funds before she does. And just imagine for a moment if this became the norm, where candidates sued their primary challengers for criticizing them. If Republicans sued Democrats because they cried fake news, that would destroy the democratic process. It's bad enough that progressive grassroots-funded candidates like Elijah Manley are already at a disadvantage because they're raising money from small-dollar donors. But to have to worry about defending themselves now, too, from defamation lawsuits if they dare to criticize their opponents, that would undermine the democratic process and make change in this country impossible if this became more common. So this is despicable behavior from a sitting member of Congress, and all other Democrats have to condemn this lawsuit if they care about democracy, because this right here, not acceptable. But this member of Congress isn't the only liberal to go full Trump this week, because after Wired published a story about content creators who are part of Chorus not disclosing money that they were taking from a dark money group, 1630, creators named in the article like Aaron Parnas, Olivia Juliana, Brian Tyler Cohen, and David Pakman accused the author of the article, Taylor Lorenz, of lying. Now, we talked about this article on last week's episode of Leftist Mafia, and all of us were struck by how defensive people like David Pakman and Brian Tyler Cohen were. Rather than addressing specific points in the article, they attacked Taylor Lorenz and argued against the straw-manned interpretation of the article. And I'm not going to restate everything that I said in that video. I'll link to it down below if you want to watch it. It was towards the second half of the episode. But basically, my feelings are that I find it nefarious that dark money groups aligned with the Democratic Party establishment are doing this. Yes, we do need to fund left-wing content creation, but we can do that without forcing creators to sign predatory contracts with unreasonable terms and conditions. As an outsider, it feels like Chorus is trying to prop up more establishment-friendly content creators who will be less inclined to criticize Democrats, who won't talk about Gaza, and who won't push the party to adopt policies that we've been trying to get them to support, like Medicare for All. In fact, on 1630's website, it suggests that one of their principles is to oppose Medicare for All, since they cite, quote, access to healthcare as one of their goals, which has always been code for incrementalism in the Democratic Party and not Medicare for All. And to be clear, not all of the Chorus members fit the centrist shitlib mold, but there's a clear preference for the types of creators that they're selecting here. They seemingly want people who won't criticize the Democratic Party, or if they do criticize Democrats, it's isolated and individualized as opposed to more systemic critiques about the structure of the Democratic Party. In other words, they want more people like Olivia Juliana and less people like me and David Dole or Kyle Kulinski. It feels like a program intended to turn them into mindless drones, or turn more people, I should say, into mindless drones for the Democratic Party in a really insidious way, through required check-ins and collaborations with like-minded centrists who also don't talk about the Gaza genocide. And they might not dictate what you can and can't cover or who you can and can't talk to, but it's not unreasonable to suspect that the goal is to mold these people in the Democratic Party establishment's image. Tina Wynn of The Verge wrote about how this was essentially what happened to her, albeit on the right. She was in a more right-leaning program like this, and they were very clearly trying to get her to adopt a particular ideological perspective. So I feel like there's got to be a better way to prop up new media on the left without getting in bed with a dark money group aligned with the Democratic establishment. However, if David Pakman and Brian Tyler Cohen would have argued that leftist content creators have to take dark money because right-wing content creators do, and we have to be on equal footing with them if we want to compete, I would disagree with that, but I'd at least be able to understand their rationalization, assuming they were upfront about this in the first place. But the fact that they immediately went on the defensive and tried to attack Taylor Lorenz's character instead of addressing the substance of the article, that was a bad look. And David Pakman's audience seemed to agree that that was a bad look, hence why they were critical of him in the comment section of the video that he posted addressing this. But that didn't stop him from declaring that the article had been fully debunked, when in actuality, Wired hasn't retracted anything in the article, and he himself didn't meaningfully debunk the article. He could have shown us the contract or went through each paragraph and explained why the article is wrong, but he didn't do that, and his audience noticed that he didn't do that, and they very clearly weren't satisfied with the explanation that he provided them. And because the chorus cohort weren't willing to show some humility and give us more answers, the discourse surrounding this story continued to proliferate in leftist and liberal spaces, which led to a new video from David Pakman titled Lawsuit for Defamation, where he contemplates suing over the Wired article, and he says the following.
Over the last few days, I've consulted with some of the top defamation attorneys in the country, lawyers who have won some of the largest verdicts, I think, in U.S. history. Now, I have not decided as of this moment whether to file a lawsuit. I'm not even going to name potential defendants in this segment. There's no reason to, but there would be multiple.
David, what the fuck, man? Jesus. Now, that was less than 20 seconds from a 9-minute, 37-second video, so I will link you to the full video down below and encourage you to watch it so you can hear his full comments. But I interpreted his comments as an implicit threat towards either Wired or Taylor Lorenz, or both. Him saying that he's consulted with some of the top defamation attorneys in the country, to me, is him communicating in a not-so-subtle way that he has the means to hire the best attorneys in the country to take on both Wired and Taylor Lorenz if need be, although he hasn't made up his mind yet. But if he did choose to sue, there would be multiple defendants. But again, he hasn't made up his mind, although there's something Wired could do to make this all go away. Delete. Wink, wink. Now, he's not saying that explicitly, obviously, but that's how I interpreted it. And that, to me, is some bitch-made Trumpian-ass behavior. And even though I have strong ideological disagreements with David Pakman, he's always been pleasant to me interpersonally, so I have nothing against him. But I have to be objective and call this out, because if a Republican did this, if they threatened to sue a journalist, I would criticize them. So I have to have the same energy for somebody like David Pakman, because I think this is deeply immoral regardless of who you are. Leftist, liberal, conservative, I don't care. This is not okay. I understand that he's angry, and he says that the article cost him paid subscriptions. I get it. But David, I think your audience would have been less inclined to stop supporting you if you actually tried to meaningfully engage with the content of the article. It's what I would do if I genuinely believed that a journalist wrote a hit piece against me. But let's be clear, we're not talking about Fox News or the Daily Wire, we're talking about Wired here. So I think that a little more than righteous indignation is warranted in this situation. But let's just assume for a moment that he's right and the article is complete bullshit. Still, his response isn't ameliorating concerns that his audience had upon reading that supposedly false story. The way that he's acting has arguably made him look worse than the article, because I don't know what's worse, allegedly taking dark money and not disclosing it, or threatening to sue a journalist. I genuinely don't know which is worse, but I still hope that David is going to choose to do the right thing and not file this lawsuit, because as a commentator himself, he should understand how important it is for people in our position to be able to express our opinions without fear of retaliation from rich petty pricks who want to silence us. But from a human perspective, to level with David, I understand how frustrating it is to see discourse about you that you can't control. I've been there. I used to have people accuse me of taking money from Jeffrey Katzenberg when I was part of TYT Network. Just this week, somebody retroactively changed that to Peter Thiel due to TYT's sponsorship with Polymarket. Is that true? No, it's not. TYT Network, much like Chorus, was created to help small creators. But unlike Chorus, TYT did not pay me. I paid TYT, specifically 10 to 15% of my monthly ad revenue, to help me grow my channel and give me advice and, walk me through different changes on YouTube. And I never had to do weekly check-ins or, go through them for interviews or anything like that. But that hasn't stopped people from accusing me of taking the same money that TYT took because I was part of TYT Network. And that sucks because it's not true. But guess what? That's just the way that it goes. I'm a public figure. That comes with the job. People are going to criticize me and arbitrarily attack me and even lie about me, and they do. But even though I've lost paid subscribers over the false shit that other people have said about me in this space, I have never once even considered a frivolous defamation lawsuit to shut them down, because in this space, we should all be expected to uphold the free speech values that allow us to do what we do. And to be clear, I'm not trying to cancel David Pakman or anything like that. If you like his content, you should support his content. This is good faith criticism from somebody who was in the same space as him, telling him in earnest to not go through with this. I guess I just expect better from people that I share this space with, since we all literally rely on free speech and the freedom to say what the fuck we want to say as part of our jobs. And we should especially demand better from lawmakers who will do anything to crush insurgent primary challengers. That is not okay. And listen, Donald Trump is already destroying free speech. So I guess my plea is that leftists and liberals shouldn't assist him in that endeavor. Is that too much to ask? Apparently so, but we'll see.